Welcome to the Independent Tinker. Today we have what is, in my opinion, one of the best chainsaw comparison videos you can watch. That is because we're going to use every pro chainsaw, except possibly if still considers some of their battery chainsaws pro, but we do have the MSA 300 battery saw. But we have every pro chainsaw from Stihl, and we are going to mill this red oak log that all these chainsaws are currently sitting on, and we're going to make one cut with each saw. Going to time it, and these are all Stihl, but that's not the point. The point is I'm going to tell you the displacement of each saw, and then we will tell you how long it takes to go through this beam, and I'm also going to measure the fuel consumption, which that in my opinion is why this is going to be the best chainsaw comparison. So I have no idea how it's going to turn out. I've never done this before. The only saws that I have milled with are the 500i, the 661, the 880, and the 881. The point of this is just to show you the comparison between the size increase in the saws, as well as fuel consumption. Do you think that a 50cc saw is going to use less fuel than a 91cc saw, which is this 661? It's a 91cc. Or will it be the same? They're going to be doing the exact same amount of work. So shouldn't it burn the same amount of fuel? We will use this 25-inch bar, which I purchased just for milling with this 880. I do have a brand new chain for this, but the chain is not a milling chain. And the difference between a milling chain and a standard or cross-cut chain is the angle of the cutter. This is roughly 10 degrees. It's supposed to be 10 degrees, and typically on the cross-cut is 30 degrees. Milling a piece of wood takes much more energy, takes much more work to cut through that piece of wood than it does to cut across the grain. So when you're milling, you're cutting with the grain typically. And I've got a bunch of straws here to try to give an analogy of the difference between cutting across the grain, which is what typical chainsaws are used for, or cutting with the grain, which is milling or ripping. So these straws are to represent the grains of wood. So this piece of oak, the grain is running this way. So we have our straws trying to represent the grain. And if you wanted to take the saw and cut through this beam, as you typically see done with a chainsaw, you're cutting across these straws or grains of the wood. And the teeth can very easily rip apart individual grains, just cut right across it. When you mill, what you're trying to do is nibble the ends of every single grain that you're trying to cut through. You're going to be bringing the chain across each end of the grain, and you just are going to nibble a little bit all the way down that grain, all the way from one end to the other. It's much more difficult on the saw. It burns a lot more fuel to cut the same amount of wood this way as it would be across the grain. So this should be a great test. I have no idea what the results are going to be. I'm very interested in figuring this out through this test. So a pint of fuel will go into each. I'm going to drain the tanks prior to putting the fuel in. The fuel will not be mixed with what comes out. We're going to be using, just because that's what I have, is 90 octane non-ethanol fuel. I was up in Pennsylvania milling, but where I live, it's a little bit more difficult to find non-ethanol fuel. So I typically run 91 or 93 octane, whatever the premium at that station is. And I also always use Amsoil's Saber Professional 2-stroke oil. I mix it at 100 to 1, so it's for everything that you see here today. The saws are running 100 to 1 ratio. That means 1 part gasoline, I'm sorry, that's backwards. 1 part of oil to 100 parts of gasoline. Stihl and most manufacturers today want you to run 50 to 1, and you can absolutely do that with Amsoil's Saber Professional if that's what you want to do. But they want 50 parts gasoline to 1 part oil. That's what 50 to 1 means. I mix it all at 100 to 1. That's what everything you see today running is going to have. And I have put many hours on this saw alone at 100 to 1, and very strenuous circumstances, which is milling. Just milling until it runs out of gas, refilling it, continuing the cut until it runs out of gas, and then filling it again, and finally able to finish the cut after filling it 2 times. I don't know if there's a harder test than that, so I can vouch for this through personal use. The other product that we're going to be using from Amsoil is their semi-synthetic bar and chain oil. I have been using this for just about as long as I've been using this. This is what got me into Amsoil, because I didn't want to smell that smoke, and this greatly reduced the smoke. I really don't smell it anymore because there's half as much. And they also have fuel stabilizer mixed in with this oil, so I never mix my own. I never add oil or fuel stabilizer. I don't have to. I can leave these for months, come back, they start right up. And they have seal conditioners, which in a 2-stroke engine is extremely important that your crankshaft seals, stay pliable, that they don't dry and crack, because once you have a leak on your crankshaft in a 2-stroke engine, you don't get oil leaks coming out. You will never see it. What you get instead is a very lean condition, which can destroy your engine. It will make it run much hotter, and you can burn up your piston and your cylinder, score your cylinder and piston. So it's very important, especially in a 2-stroke engine, that your crankshaft seals are pliable, that they're not leaking air into the engine, because that's what it will do. It will pull that air in, and that means there's more air than what the carburetor or the fuel injection planned on, and that's how you end up with a lean burn condition, which can potentially and typically leads to you burning up the engine, which is about the most expensive fix that you can have with a 2-stroke piece of equipment. So I protect myself with the Saber Professional and also this bar and chain oil. I have seen a drastic reduction in bar wear by using this. So even when I'm using a 50-inch bar on this 661, this is what I use, and I really don't see bar wear anymore. You might be able to see there's a knot, which is a branch which causes the grain to change. You can see right here the grain is going like this. I can see it in this light, and that will make these work much harder. The saw works much harder to cut the grain when it changes direction. So I will cut it off about here, and then I can give you the length of the cut that it'll be, but it's about 10 inches wide. And then, like I said, I'll put 16 ounces or 1 pint of fuel in the tank, except for this. This is a battery operated saw or powered saw, It's the MSA 300. It is Stihl's most powerful battery saw. I do have the AP 500S battery, which is their most powerful battery, most energy dense, and it is required in order to get the highest chain speed. It has 3 speeds available. In order to get the middle and top chain speed, you have to have this battery. Otherwise, you're going to be limited to the lowest chain speed, but I'm going to do this with the lowest chain speed because if you read the manual, which I always suggest you read your owner's manual, you'll find there's a surprising amount of relevant data in that. But Stihl says if you're bucking, which means you're cutting a log into firewood sections, then run it at the slowest speed. So we're doing a lot more than bucking this log or beam today. So I'm going to run it at the slowest chain speed. I have no idea if this thing can handle it. It may overheat and shut off, and that's okay. I don't think Stihl developed this saw for people to mill with, but I'm going to try it. We'll see. But it's not its use case, so if it overheats, I'm not going to hold it against it. It was never designed to do that. But we'll see. And if it does mill on the slowest speed, I'll put the battery on the charger, and at the end, if we have enough log left or beam left, then I'll put it on the high speed and we'll see if it'll go. 261 is 50 cc's. My neighbor, thankfully, has allowed me to borrow his 362. This is the only saw that is not mine, and it is a 59 cc saw. The 400 is a 67 cc saw. The 462 is a 72 cc saw. The 500i is a 79 cc saw. The 661 is a 91 cc saw, and the 880 and the 881 are both 122 cc. Of course, we're going to be using a different bar and chain for those, so it won't be completely apples to apples, and we'll see. Will they burn more fuel because they're using a different chain that has a wider kerf, meaning a wider cut, because it's 404 compared to this 3/8 low profile chain that I'm going to be using on all the other saws. So I'm interested in seeing, is there going to be a fuel consumption difference? Are they all going to be about the same because they're all going to be doing the exact same amount of work, cutting the same beam? Or is this 500i going to have the advantage because it's fuel injected? I don't know. But I'm looking forward to finding out.
And you were milling it?
Yep, milling for 10 feet. So a full throttle cut, 10 inches wide of red oak, 10 foot long.
The big one.
Okay.
881.
And I'm starting with the smallest saw first because if I started with the big saw and went down, I would probably stall this out every single time. It's a lot easier to go from the smaller saw and get used to the speed that it cuts at, then go to the next bigger saw and so on, so that I don't stall the chain out so much. We had from the
Probably
260.
one of the bigger saws.
Okay.
Because he went through it faster.
Correct. He went through it faster. That's what I
say
have.
either the 500 or the 462. Because the small saws, they're going to burn less fuel, but they're going to take forever to do it. So you're going to be running them forever. The big saws, I think it's probably, my guess is somewhere in the middle in the sweet spot.
Okay, that's a great guess.
500i
Okay. Any reason why?
because of the fuel injection.
That's exactly what I.
The reason.
That's
Yeah.
exactly my thought. In your opinion, which one do you think was the best and which was the worst?
I mean, you got that fuel injected 500i. I mean, so it's that you think that you save a little bit on the fuel economy there.
Yep.
I would have to guess that one.
Okay.
You test it out.
Oh yeah.
Most fuel efficient, I'd probably say 462, and the worst might be the 500.
Okay. Now, do you mind? Drank the most and drank the least.
The 500 I drank the most, probably.
Okay.
Just because I know they're thirsty.
All right.
They do well.
And there's no wrong answer.
And the one that used the least fuel was the 300 battery.
That is good job.
Yes.
I was waiting for somebody to say that. But as far as gas saws, which one would you think used the least?
Probably the 880.
Okay. Used the least.
Yes.
Okay.
Because if my thought process would be, the more power would get through quicker, so it'd be running less.
It does.
Shorter. It'd be running shorter.
It does.
Time.
That is correct. But they all did the same amount of work. It's just a bigger saw did it in less time. I'll help you out there. Let's go with the 881.
Or the 881. Okay,
yeah, because that is the exact same saw, just still made it updates to make it more fuel efficient. So we'll go with the 881.
Well, if they made updates to make it more fuel efficient, then obviously that was the most efficient on fuel.
I did not get the audio for this cut. I apologize. I think the battery on the microphone died. But it gives me an opportunity to talk again about the bar and chain on the 880 and the 881. The bar mounts are physically larger, so I cannot put the 20-inch bar and ripping chain on these saws. So they're using a 25-inch bar and chain, and the chain is sharpened at 30 degrees instead of 10 degrees. So this chain is meant to cut across the grain, not mill it against the grain. So it is doing more work with a chain that it is not optimized for the work it's being done, because we're making a wider cut with that 404 pitch as opposed to 3/8 low profile. Also, I flipped the beam, and I did that because there's a black stain starting. So the side we were milling before is now on the bottom, and a black stain in the wood, especially oak, is typically an indication that there's metal, and I did not want to hit the chain on the metal. It will really destroy the chain. So there are also a lot more knots in the center of the beam, which is harder for the saws to cut through. I'm very surprised that the 661 took so long. You can give your opinion on that, why it took so much longer, but tune into part 2. I'm going to make that cut again, and we'll see whether or not I can make some changes and get it to cut faster than 462.